Big deal.
Yeah. Well, and I sent Steven a text earlier. So
Yeah.
he responded. He said he hopes to be rejoining us soon. So we'll dedicate this episode to our brother Steven, who we dearly miss. Crbnly. It's
What are you doing to be more Crbnly?
right. So that's kind of our question that we're approaching today's conversation about, is like, since we've, I guess, last seen each other, or just really within this last year or so, what lifestyle changes or maybe what brand changes we've made in our life to become more Crbnly. But I think us three are only, maybe Lauren, are the only ones in the world right now that knows what our idea of what Crbnly means. So do you want to try to maybe give it a quick shot and like explaining what our goal is as far as spreading the word Crbnly and things like that, and then we can go into what we've been doing to become more Crbnly?
So I think Crbnly is an action. The more I've been reflecting on this, and that's why I think, not only do we call our podcast Crbnly Conversations, because we want to have conversations around what people are doing or what you're doing or what I'm doing to be more Crbnly, but it's an action that we can take to lower our carbon footprint, to get interested more in our community and be a part of that, to leaving things better than the way you found them, but around in the interest of, like, we're caretakers of this planet, of this ecosystem, of each other, and the things that we have and see and use around us. So being conscious, supportive, just all around Crbnly.
Yep.
Like, it's kind of like a state of mind, but in action.
Yep.
That's my first go.
No, I kind of have the same thought. It's more of like an action word, to where it's just, there's no specific definition, but it's just about how you can take action, what ways we're taking action currently, just kind of giving our audience and our community a simpler way, or just better, not even necessarily advice, just really having these conversations that'll help people explore different options and what the options that they have to become more conscious about the brands that they support and things like that, to reduce their carbon footprint. The word carbon footprint and green are thrown around, and eco-friendly are always thrown around. So to me, all of those tie into what Crbnly means as well. And then it just wraps all those in together, along with taking action on whatever your goals are to help the environment.
In a lot of ways, I think what you just shared reminds me of how hard it is to define, like, sustainable or sustainability. Like, what does it actually mean?
Right.
And instead of defining it with a long treat or thesis or symposium, we just gave it a word, Crbnly.
Crbnly. Yep.
Yep.
Crbnly's the name.
So what does that mean to you?
So, we just want to have conversations. We don't want to be the typical podcast where we're here just trying to, like, teach. It's just more of a conversation. That's really the easiest way to learn, is to be included in the conversation instead of just being told what to do. So that's kind of my goal, is to share what I do, what I try to do, at least. I'm not going to sit here and act like I'm the greenest. I have a green hoodie on, but I'm not like the greenest person in the world. I've been slowly going into that type of lifestyle, and, becoming a homeowner last year definitely helped out a lot. So I know we wanted to kind of speak about what are some things that we've done recently to become more Crbnly. So for me, the big change was becoming a homeowner. I live in Columbus, Ohio. For those of you that don't know, I live in a community called Franklinton, which was like the first settlement here in Columbus. And we're fortunate to have a nonprofit in the neighborhood called Franklinton Farms. They have, I believe right now we're up to 11 small community urban farms So they have really, other than you, Stephen, and I having these conversations over the last few years and just sharing articles and just different knowledge with each other, they've been really the catapult for me to begin learning how to become more carbonly and really taking action on it. So the main ways, of course, are just like they're urban farms. So, of course, learning how to grow my own food. So they're big on that. We'll have an episode later on more surrounded around food, and I look forward to kind of discussing Franklinton Farms a little bit more, and maybe we can even get someone from them to speak with us. So I don't want to go too in depth with that, but what I've done though is I volunteer with them at least once a week now, either 2 to 5 hours, and not only does it help me as far as feel good with my mental health and things like that, they're teaching me a lot. Shout out to Jody. She's the lead volunteer, and she's super helpful, super nice. And so one thing that I've really been learning, of course, is growing your own food. So I've started gardening. I've put a couple beds in my backyard. I've got some vegetables growing, and then I plan on making my backyard kind of like a food forest. Putting different berries, different vegetables that will just come back every year, and I don't have to, to redo them. So
some perennials.
So that's one way, for me.
Well, and you've been on this journey for a while now, like since you've been a since you've been a homeowner and learning more about your community. Like, I suspect not only we'll have an episode or two and maybe some conversations with Jody and others, but we'll get check-ins on your journey. What wasn't it today?
Yep.
You had you sent Stephen and I a photo of you call them your baby pepper plants.
Yeah.
Maybe tell me a little bit more. Like, what kind of peppers are
So
they?
they're called,
Did you start from seed?
I want to say they're called Bengal peppers. Basically, it's like a tricolor bell pepper.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I went today after work and checked on my garden bed. So also Franklinton Farms has a community garden where there's 7 beds available for people that live in the neighborhood can sign up and then actually have control over their own bed, grow their own fruits and vegetables if they'd like. So I was fortunate enough to get a 5x8 bed through them at the community garden, and so I've got some tomatoes growing, some peppers, carrots.
So these peppers specifically, though, did you start them from seed in like a hothouse or in your basement, or
I did not.
Did you buy them?
Next year? I plan on trying that. What happened was when we did the community garden kickoff, Franklinton Farms had some small starter plants.
They had volunteers.
Yeah, they had some starter plants, available. So that because
nice.
Like I said, I'm learning how to. I'm slowly transitioning into this lifestyle. So I actually did buy seeds, and I showed up with my packs of seeds and was happy, thinking hey Jody, look what I have. And she's like, well, if you put those in the ground now at seed, you're not going to have any tomatoes for 4 months. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And by then it'll be too cold. It might not even work out. So. That
silly winters.
Right. So, that was a learning lesson. So now I know, next year I know when to start my seeds so that, I don't know, it just seems like it'd feel a little bit better.
It's not something you think of, right? And what's crazy is each plant and even varieties within the same species of plants, they have different growing times. Don't quote me, but I think peppers, tomatoes are in that 90 to 110 day. And that's what Jody was sharing. Like, you start them in May or April, they may just start producing, and then the first frost could come in September. And peppers and tomatoes, again, I'm geeking out here. I'm really excited about this stuff. They're hot weather plants, so they love the heat. They love the water. They don't like that cold. I grew up in Minnesota. We used to, sometimes when we think it would get too cold, we'd wrap them with blankets. So we'd give all our tomatoes blankets overnight. So you keep some juicy tomatoes almost into October.
Wow. See, that's what I'm trying to learn, to where I read an article yesterday just about how, COVID definitely changed a lot of people's lifestyles to where home gardening picked up during COVID. And now what we're seeing with inflation and everything like that, I believe the article I read, it said the price of vegetables and fruits, inflate, I think 7 to 15% every year, something like that. So,
when you're thinking about a 19-cent banana, that's not too bad. But when you're thinking about a $3 or $4 a pound squash or something that's a little bit more expensive, or strawberries.
Exactly.
It gets insane.
And especially, depending on how large of a family you have, things get pricey. And on top of that, on top of saving money, the quality of it is going to be, if not, not the same, a lot better. You know what I mean?
Oh, it should be better
if you're doing it correctly.
Like, it's exactly from the source, right? And you're tasting it fresh and ripe of the conditions. Yep. I've grown my fair share of vegetables, and I used to say that first tomato of the crop, the first one of the season that you got to eat, that was ripe and off the vine, to me that was worth like $30, $40. Like getting something because it's that delicious. But then it's like what do you call it? Depreciating depreciating returns. Like after like your 30th tomato, you're good. Yeah. Like 20 cents, 30 cents. Like I have 1,000 more or 100 more. Like you're good.
And my plan is to pass any extras out to neighbors and things like that. And to kind of tie into my next thing is like I've been learning about, if things go bad, what I've been doing now, I used to just throw out food. I'll admit it. I used to waste a lot of food.
It's what, I'm not going to quote a number, but 13 to 20% of all food that's produced in America is wasted. I'm going to Google that while you're talking.
So, I'm a bad guy when it came to that. But what I've done recently in the last month, I have a compost, a portable food compost out back in my yard.
Sure.
So what I've been learning is what to and what not to put in the compost. Cause at first I'm thinking like, I could just, any food scraps that I don't eat, I'll just throw in there and it'll turn to soil. You know what I mean? And so I've been slowly learning that. And I guess the biggest change, what's helped me is when I used to rake my yard, I would put them in lawn bags. I'd spend hours raking a yard, put them in lawn bags, carrying the bags out to my curb for the city to come pick up. But leaves are actually like really, really good for your compost.
Primo.
So it's like just a double win. I'm saving time and effort, and then on top of that, it's helping me create my own soil even more. I'm not having to
enrich it and create. Most of the topsoil, like it's only a couple inches thick, and that's where the majority, if not almost all, of the organisms live that are helping the soil stay healthy and a thriving ecosystem. So back to food waste. I'm going to read this. It's from the USDA, United States Department of Agriculture. It's a little whacked. I didn't expect it to be this large. In the United States, food waste is estimated at between 30 to 40% of the food supply.
Molly with FDR. Sorry, I missed.
Oops, sorry.
Oh, hey, Molly.
That was a voicemail.
Our first guest.
I didn't know I had my speaker on. So you said 30 to 40%. Is that just in America?
In the United States, be clear, it says of the food supply. So the food supply is like the moment you plant something and it doesn't make it.
Okay.
So it's wasted. To grocery stores throwing away stuff that rots or people dropped or whatever. Restaurants, all the food or the buffets, the things that you were tossing. That's their estimate for the entire supply line. And that's at 2010. That's a data from 2010. This corresponds approximately to 133 billion pounds of food. It's just sitting in landfills. I think back to the Crbnly topic, the whole point of this, all that extra food going in, oh my God, not compost, but landfills, that's creating a whole bunch of methane and carbon dioxide and being released in the atmosphere. Yep. Like I don't know if this is true or not, but I had a professor when I was in college. He said the reason why people are hungry or starving in the United States is because we produce too much food. And then when you think about, like, if we are throwing away a third of it, and yet there are still people going hungry, maybe we would value it more and be more, I guess, carbonly about it if we knew there wasn't enough or there was going to be a shortage if we didn't manage it more correctly or more manageably.
Yeah.
Anyways, I'll stop tirading. We'll share the link in the show notes so you can explore more.
Yep.
I'm sure there's a lot of unpacking to do in the USDA
For sure. And
report.
we'll definitely be unpacking those type of topics more down the line. That's for sure. My last thing that I had as far as me being more carbonly that I've learned through my time so far with Franklinton Farms is rain barrels. I'll be honest. I grew up in apartments most of my life. We never had land to have any type of gardening or anything like that. So to be honest with you, of course I knew that there's ways to capture rainwater, of course, but I've never really saw it with my own eyes, and really thought about the importance of it. And like I said, now becoming a homeowner, I'm always looking for ways to save money, things like that. So Franklin Farms introduced me to rain barrels. They have, I don't even know how many, but there's one of the gardens has 2 500-gallon rain barrels. That one of them's completely filled with water already. So,
and that's just from this spring.
Yeah. Yep. And then what they do is any farm that's located where there's an actual house next door, they'll get permission, of course. They'll hook rain barrels to that neighbor's house, to the gutters, and collect all the rainwater from them. And then if it's an area that absolutely needs like access to a hose, they'll actually pay the water bill for that neighbor as well to use their water.
So they don't actually have access to water or wells other than what they're collecting off the roofs.
That, and hopefully a neighbor allows them to. Yep.
And a neighbor that.
Yeah, and they're literally. I we'll get into it in another episode. I don't know how much food they're producing, but it's a lot.
Yeah, it's what'd you say earlier? A 5 foot by.
I have a 5 by 8 garden bed just myself through them, but they have 11 different small community farms throughout the neighborhood. Each serves its own kind of and each plot has its own like designated what's being grown, what's done there, and things like that. So it's pretty awesome, kind of the infrastructure that they've built. But yeah, I mean, I'll share some pictures along with this episode. But I ordered a 50-gallon rain barrel online. So the city of Columbus, I'm assuming most cities, so all of the listeners out there, if you're interested in getting a rain barrel yourself, check with your city. A lot of cities, from what I've learned, have discounts on rain barrels. So if you take like a small course just to kind of learn about the importance of collecting rainwater, they'll give you like a $50 voucher, something like that, towards your rain barrel.
Oh, that's cool.
I didn't actually do that because I was in a little bit of a rush to want to buy it. So I ordered one through Sam's Club. It was $90 for a nice 50-gallon rain barrel. This one's a little fancy looking. It looks like it's a wooden barrel, even though it's made out of plastic. So that's kind of why it was a little pricier. I went with that look.
But it goes with your decor in your yard.
Exactly. Yeah, I went with that look because I have it in my one of my front beds in the front of the house. So I didn't want it to look, just like this huge jug sitting out there. But I'm thinking now so I've only had that connected technically for about a week or so, and it's already filled to the T. We had a lot of rain last week and over the weekend. So I've already got 50 gallons of rainwater. I went out, watered my garden today with it, watered all of my house plants with it. And things like that. So like I said, it's just a plus. It's being carbonly and it's saving me money. So, I mean, can't complain.
The rain barrels are amazing because I mean, the water comes out of the sky for free when it does come.
Yep. And granted, you can't drink it or anything like that. I'm sure if you wanted to get thick into the weeds, there's a way to, to distill it and everything like that to where you can make it into drinking water.
It's for your plants.
It's for the plants, and they like it a lot better than the water from the sink. So,
yeah. So you got me in a rabbit hole. So I Googled how much food can you grow in 40 square feet, because that's your garden, right? And a book I'm not familiar with, but it looks like it's been around for the last 60, 70 years in many editions, called Square Foot Gardening for Beginners. It says, for square foot gardening, you need as little as 16 square feet per person for fresh eating, and about 32 square feet per person to have enough for preserving. So in your 40 square foot garden, you don't have enough for you to eat all year, but you have enough to start putting food by. And I'll forward you this, but I found a handy dandy chart on which crops, how much square footage they take up per. So you can kind of plot your garden if you haven't already.
Wow. Okay. That's interesting.
I assumed, but I never even, I've read about companion gardening and greenhouse gardening and different approaches, but think about like per square foot, which I guess if you're going to farm, it's all about optimizing production per amount of soil. So,
yep.
Oh,
that's
yeah,
awesome.
nice.
And I'll finish my part with this is like, you have to, you have to learn in ways that are relatable to you. So like, of course, there's always been different ways for me to learn about these topics, and especially gardening.
Yep.
But I guess before nothing really came my way to where I really related to it and held on to it. And it never really piqued my interest. So I say that to say this is to the audience is like, use us as a guide. Use social media. Like everybody's on social media nowadays. There's so many tips and helpful tips that you can get on social media, whether it be Facebook, TikTok. And I just want to give a shout out to Goo, Gardening with Goo. Shout out to the Green Thumb Gang on Facebook. So, I mean, there's a guy named Goo that he started. I'll put the link. I'll put his website link as well in the podcast, because he has like a document that you can download. It's $10, but he gives like tips on starting a garden. But you can join the Facebook group for free, totally free. Like I said, it's called Green Thumb Gang on Facebook. And I mean, it's just nonstop pictures and things like that of people just asking for advice. And I mean, if you have a question about anything that's going on in your garden or even a house plant, you can post the picture right there. And I mean, within minutes, someone is commenting with helpful tips. And so that's another, on top of just me volunteering through Franklinton Farms, that's honestly been the second biggest help for me as far as learning and knowing what I'm doing in the garden, because a simple mistake can really ruin your crops. So, you don't want to just go out there and start throwing seeds down. You do want to take the time into learning more about it. And like I said, nowadays there's a lot more avenues that you can take to learn about it that are more relatable. It's not just like the boring gardening of back in the day of what we think, of just like a housewife going out and watering the flowers. Like it's really a lifestyle now.
I'm laughing. Like yours and my like association with gardening is so different, and I can't wait to explore more of that. It kind of feels like a good time for a break. Maybe a short word from our sponsor. I'm sure they're going to be really excited to tell everyone about their products and sponsor Crbnly Conversations.
Reach out to us if you'd like to put an advertisement here.
Oh yeah,
but you have to be Crbnly. We're not just supporting any business.
You got it.
So how about you, Chad? What's so you are kind of you were like the catalyst, I guess, of, I hope I have the right word, the person that started You kind of
Careless is a good
started
word.
these conversations with Steven and I.
Yeah.
We were all living in New York
Because
City at the time, and you come from a lot different background than we do, and you had a lot of the knowledge, and you slowly shared it. But oddly enough, it didn't really start out. We didn't start out talking about like gardening and food deserts and things like that. It all started off with you showing us a pair of Allbirds,
yeah,
and that was what, 3 years ago?
I bet longer.
Yeah, maybe even
I bet
longer.
But yeah, like it confused me, I think is the best way to put it. It confused me because like I'm not fashion forward and I've been pretty basic and plain in how I dress myself. Look good, look sharp, but never really stressed about it. And I found Allbirds and found like first they were great. Like that, I always sit there like wearing clothes on your feet, and they're super comfortable, and the colors are amazing, and they're an eye getter, and they get other people's attention, and then put all that design and style aside, and they tell you how much energy and carbon goes into each production, and they manage their supply chains and make it all carbon neutral or carbon negative, and they've started a labeling system for that's universal and shared it with the world, amongst a whole bunch of other things. We could go on, and it just blew my mind because both you and Steven, I mean, I learned so much about a sense of style and fashion and a connection to it, and especially both being black men and how you connected in that way with your communities and your peers, and was just blown away that you guys didn't know what Allbirds were. Didn't know. I think in the beginning I just presumed you did or heard of them at least, and you were guys like, what? I'm like, there's no way I can be the cool kid here.
Yep.
Like that's not how it works for the entirety of my life. Like if I'm original at anything, it's because I dressed it like a hipster before hipsters were a thing, because that's how we dressed living in rural Minnesota, not because that was a thing I needed to do. So yeah, that's just like the entryway into these conversations. And I mean, there's 1,000 lanes and 1,000 places to go about them.
And I guess I think the reason I brought that up is because, preparing for this conversation, I was eager to hear, because I already know you're very Crbnly, you know what I mean? From
well, yes and no. Like I try to be carbon. I like how you said that earlier. Like you try to, and you're not always perfect, but I'm at least I'm thinking about it. And I'm weighing my decisions against how Crbnly can I be.
Yeah,
we want to put it like that. And I was thinking about this question today, and I think if you think about the context of in the last few weeks, like nothing really stands out, because I think it's kind of a what am I always doing? And that's what I'd rather share about how I approach being Crbnly, like in my day to day, and the trade-offs of it. Like I like to leave things better than the way I found them, or clean as I go. And I like to walk. I like to go out and walk my neighborhoods, check on what's going on, what's getting built, or chat with the neighbor. But as I do that, I try to pick up some of the garbage. But I mean, most everyone in their life, when you walk around, unless you're in Disney World or somewhere, there's someone being paid to clean up all the trash because people litter, or the wind helps litter, or what not. There's stuff all over the place. So I've come to terms with myself that if there's a nail, something sharp, hazardous, dangerous, I'm picking that up. I'm throwing that away. Like that I can commit
you're a
to.
good neighbor.
And I seem to find them on some kind of semi-regular cadence. Lauren thinks it's crazy. Even in New York, I'll stop in the middle of the street and I'll pull a big nail off the ground. That's just what I do, because it's part of it's karma. Like I feel like I'm paying it forward, but like maybe I'll get a little good, karma. But what's kind of funny is like where I live here, when I take a ride out of my house.
Well, let them know where you're at currently.
Oh yeah, I'm in Louisville, Kentucky, near I'm in Phoenix Hill, near the Nulu development. For any of you that have been to Louisville, you'll know all about that because it is the hot place to be. Yep. But anyways, as I take a ride out and I go, not always, but there's But 20, 30 feet from my house, I don't know if someone parks there and smokes a cigar or they drive by regularly and they buy those, like, I think they're the Swishers, usually the grape flavor ones, but sometimes other ones. And it's like the 3-pack bag. And really consistently, there's a 3-pack bag sitting on the ground, right in the same 5-foot, 10-foot space. And it befuddles me. Like, and to me, it's like I would like to meet that person and have a Crbnly conversation with them about, like, why?
Yeah.
Like,
why not?
I mean, come and use my garbage
Yeah.
bin. Just come and use it. You know, buy them in bulk. I don't know, but that's one of the things I try to do, and I try to think, be, act Crbnly. The other thing I like to do, you know, we talked a little while ago about you and your community gardening and starting your own garden at home and your pathway to home ownership, creating some of that, like, interest, because now that you got a lawn, you know, land to do something, you know, what do you want to do with it? And I've had that in the past, and I dream of doing that again in the future. But in the meantime, I don't. And I either don't stay in one place long enough to commit to a community garden, or I'm too afraid to get involved like I used to be, because I'm kind of all in.
Yeah.
and 10 times more than I need to be. So the one thing that I trade off in this, I'm not growing my food, but I make it a special point to go meet the people that do and to buy from them. So farmers market's what I'm getting to. And for me, like, going to a farmer market, talking to the person that either produced something, whether they grew it or raised an animal and butchered it and packaged it, to some bread or jams, like, you name it, like all the goodies you can get at a farmer's market. That to me is about as Crbnly on a food point of view, outside of growing it and being part of communities that grow it yourself. That's the next best thing. And I really think farmers markets, and then even like what Judy and what you guys are talking about, like with your Franklinton Farms, is like they're producing foods. They're connecting local community members to where they get their food, how they get their food. That's really what a farmer's market is. Plus, you get to meet the growers, the producers. And if you're really cool and you get to go to the farm, or really lucky and get to go to the farm, then you get to meet the food itself, you know, and then, you know, in that transaction, that's part of the deal. I'm fortunate enough where we live here in Louisville is that every Tuesday there's a farmer's market. I mean, if it takes 3 minutes to walk to it, that's because I'm picking up some garbage on the ground, you know, along the way. But there's like 7 or 8 farmers there. I go to each stall. There's one guy I don't like to go. He's just kind of rude. Didn't really like him, but maybe I haven't given him a chance to get to know him. But then I meet my food. I exchange him some money, and like today I got a quart of fresh strawberries, some scapes, which are like the tall ends of garlic that grew all fall, I believe. Okay. Don't quote me, but they're really good. You chop them up. They're like, instead of chives are usually hollow, like when you cut the tops in the green, or the spring onions. These are solid, but they have that garlicky spring onion taste. I think they're delicious. Our friend Yvette.
What do you usually cook? What do you use?
I mean, sometimes I like to just fry some eggs or scramble some eggs and add some of that to it. Otherwise, I ate these ones in a salad, just raw. Like, I chopped up a salad. I mean, I put them. Again, that's the other thing about growing food. Like, chop it up, eat it. Like, just clean it to a degree. There's no really wrong way to do this. It doesn't taste any better than getting it from the farmer or growing it.
Definitely not.
So I think for me, those are the 2 things that I'd like to share now. There's plenty more, because I like to believe that I try to live my life like this all the time. And when I can't, it's because I've chosen poorly or been too busy to do something about it. Yep. But I give myself the grace. Like, I don't know. Like, we all do what we can, and I think part of the fundamentals of back to why this call, and even the Allbirds example, is like all these little actions add up to impactful changes over time. And we could rally. Let's close some coal factories. Let's close some coal mines or natural gas. Like, that would be a huge impact. That would eliminate more carbon than you and I having conversations and making better choices that we could do the rest of our lives. But if we do that the rest of our lives, and then those people that we talk to go and talk to someone else and talk to someone else, talk to someone else, and really motivate, help, support, and have these type of community-centric conversations that then, I mean, I hate to say this, you could probably have a few coal factories.
Right.
Because we're making better decisions that are changing the way things are produced. Maybe we won't need them, or maybe we have them on backlog. So when something stupid happens, we still have energy for hospitals. I don't know. Just making things up right now.
Yeah.
But,
no, and
that's the crazy thing. We're really in charge of that.
Yep.
Like there's everything in moderation is probably the catchphrase that goes along with that rambling. But yeah, it feels good.
It definitely does.
It feels good to have this conversation. And
it does. And I think there's a Teddy Roosevelt quote where he says, "Do what you can with what you've got where you are." I think that is like, that sums up just kind of this conversation. That kind of sums up Crbnly as well, because like, you know, a lot of us, we can't afford to buy a Tesla. We can't afford to put solar lights and, you know, things like that on our roof and all that. But you can, like what Roosevelt says, you can do what you can with what you've got where you are. So you don't have to necessarily have access to all of those things. You can start out by picking up nails out of the road. You can, you know what I mean? You can start by collecting rainwater, by, instead of wasting all of your food waste, starting a compost in your backyard. These are just simple solutions. And that's kind of our goal, is to like, just not, I don't want to say educate, but just kind of have these conversations where we're normal day-to-day people. We don't have the money to make these drastic changes in our life, but we can start somewhere, and hopefully these conversations will spark something in the new community that we build through this podcast, to where, people can start seeing kind of how my eyes have opened recently, is just like, I used to always just think I had to have all this money to be carbon conscious or Crbnly, but you don't. It can be free. You can start out, it's free 99, and the only thing that I paid for out of the examples that I gave was the rain barrel. But like I said, there's ways you can even get those for free or discounted through your city. You might find one in the alley. You might find a big plastic bucket sitting in the alley that you could turn into a rain barrel,
Or you might volunteer yourself to help community gardens or other places do good, be a part of the community group, and there might be a rain barrel waiting around after a few hours.
Yep.
Or, because again, like you said, like we're going to build this community. I also like we're going to grow it and hopefully encourage others to do the same, right? Because so much of these actions are, I guess, pun intended, grassroots.
Yeah.
I don't think I've said a more thoughtfully specific pun in my entire life. And it's not that funny because it's actually grassroots activity and engagement. And like, once you build a community, you're connecting and you're sharing what you're trying to do, people are going to do things to help you and support you for no other reason other than they can.
Yep. And by building that community, one of my neighbors eventually might walk over and say, "Hey, what's that barrel you have sitting out front?" And that'll give me the opportunity to share with them, the importance of it. And if everyone in the community started having rain barrels, I mean, it'd be awesome. Like it'd just be amazing. I'd love to live in that neighborhood where you walk down the street and you see rain barrels connected to everyone's gutters, So,
oh my God, yes.
That's what it is. That's, just to kind of wrap this up, is like, that's our goal, is to just have these conversations to open our eyes along with our audience's eyes of just different ways we can become more Crbnly and make small changes in our lifestyles, for the betterment of the environment, for the betterment of our community, our own mental health, our own physical health. There's just nothing but advantages to it. So, we hope that you all continue to listen. We hope you all like this conversation, but we definitely have more conversations to come down the line. And